Hi everybody. Thanks for coming. I have been at Real-Time Space in that studio right there for the last 3 months, and it's been really wonderful to have a place to go and vibe, which is my favorite thing to do in the studio space. So that's been a real pleasure, actually, and I am so grateful to Kiko and everybody here who I ran into over the 3 months for sharing this space. It was really nice, very familial, cozy. So for my first talk, we did an opening talk when I started in August, and I did a more traditional artist talk with slides and described my practice and my sculpture and poetry and how performance and how it kind of weaves together. But I was sort of just feeling for this closing one where I'm on my way out and An's on their way in to do a poetry reading, because I was just feeling the energy of this week felt like a lot. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to read poems, and if people want to ask questions, I guess because that's part of a... Are we doing questions?
Yes. Yes, we'll do questions at the end of both talks.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still super open to it. I know for a poetry reading it may not make sense to ask questions, but if you have burning questions, please ask them, because I've never done a poetry reading with questions, so I'm almost, I guess, curious, what... can you tell me what that poem means, or something like that, I don't know. But I'm very open to it, so, yeah. This is my candle live stream. I'll probably stand in front of it. I also brought Riso prints. They're on the table in the front there of a poem. It was one of the things I worked on while I was here. I've done Riso before, but I wanted to learn how to do it better, I guess, and I spent some time going into YouTube polls of how to separate color layers and bitmap things and stuff like that. So this is my first print where I've gotten a little tiny bit more expertise on how to do that stuff. So please take one if you like, and yeah, enjoy. I'm going to start with a dressing blessing. It's a blessing, but about getting fitted. Dressing blessing. I limp out today, my body loose and heavy. My locus of thought shimmers when wind sweeps through the corridor, curving all my parts that exist in ambiguity. Dull throbs, small in my lobe. Fabric ties of think won't lay flat on the lines. They bend as the same as words that schism to my arms swing. Hey, I'm down the road already. My conscientious long neck not fit. I long to gift a grip of roses to a cool, beautiful babe, like a frog with a bounty of gifts. This next one is called Bhasha, which means language in Sanskrit. And it was also recently the whole title of a sculpture I did, which I guess would have been nice to show you, but okay. The rhododendrons are now blooming. They are known to me as familiars, like the small, rough licks of cats on the block, and the buzz of unavoidably GMO pollens. I am here completely on accident, kinless with no real language to lay out in. When I stretch my hips in one tongue, it is haunted, sing-song, lewd and childish. I try another and am tongue burned by absolute presence, the news cycle, Wi-Fi radiation. I understand the coloniality of each minute, but please, cannot be constantly sensed. That is asking too much of a body brain to understand that it is not made of grievance. this next one is a poem from the Reset. Warning them. It's called Late August. When you pulled up on your new motorcycle like 2 years hadn't even happened, Pilsen was pink from the sunset, and I sighed on accident. Saw your recent soft scars, your braids askew, watched you pull off your leather skull cap in slow motion. You say you're mostly fine after the hit and run, and we admire the sunlight on chrome in silence. And then I slide on the slow to be near you again. Look, there is homosexuality in the way rubber tread grips pavement. For the moment a turn hangs in midair, the way gravity suspends for 1 second. The wind whips single tears out of us. I'm hard smiling on the Thunderbird. If you lean in, can you hear my head echoing with a downward release, a waterfall of piano keys, and the main ingredient singing, "Let me prove my love to you." Okay, more love poems. This one's entitled Pronoia. They call this part of Wisconsin the driftless zone, or just the driftless. Somehow swampy because it avoided the ice age that flattened the rest of the plains. This morning is so humid, it's hard to imagine what came before this kind of humidity. What comes before this morning? Subconscious desires in our dreams? The drunkenness of moonlight? Certain realization, this is girl next. I'm most fag when I feel like this. My intentions are fancy and invincible. I've practiced being quiet since the womb, but around you, I forget. Yelling at dinner and then clapping both hands over my mouth. If you'd like it, I'll move to you like the thickness of clouds, like evaporation. Silent and natural to get a line of salt off your eyelids. This one's sort of the counterpart to that. It's called Montana Euphoria. I think I wrote this one at the very beginning of the pandemic. Just like context. It is all at odds in the long year. You are in love and also a wobble. Over a slow water bead type beat, you tell your lover, I'm boiling. We eat sockeye off linen, wear press-on scales, act out just the cloud scenes of ancient text. It reads, I'm cast from pomegranate, jewel, wax. I'm a single motion repeated in the salt room, heated by sleep. This year, ellipses are revealed as contentment sounds. A hush wards off the sad returns. Bent cedar graves, a whatever being. This is an old manuscript. It's kind of funny because I've changed a lot of these poems, so I don't want to read them anymore. But maybe I'll read some off my laptop, just awkwardly. But this is an old one, but I actually like it. So it's called Raga 2017, Leena's version. Fear Tales of I accidentally typed Amazon instead of Seattle in a text and fell apart screaming like a screaming dog at the end of the sentence. Bye-bye to this port, only memory from here on. The shoals at Point Lobos cut me loose, as did Wonder Valley's emptiest basketball court. Now I'm unafraid of love as I'm unafraid of dying. That is, I'm very nervous. Their inevitability, a silk fog around my organs. changed it up. Okay, well, let's see. I'm gonna do this thing. I'm gonna sit. This next one is called Test Site for Memory Service. Number 1. All the way back to when I was shrieking and my sister was too, pointing at juicy rhododendron in the immigrant yard, i.e. big opportunity bouquet. Now move, I say. I am consciously yearning to get back to the hilarious and near unknown, toddler mind of anticipation. Number 2. Motherboards, school districts. Everything tightens around revisionist history. It's not Mumbai or Bombay, but New World, though what to unname an implied no-name fate like urban boundary line. Can we upend the field and the sea? No question. This is not that different. Yet another project of long violence. Worship through lead paint siding, plastic milk cups of petrichor that seep out of the earth in the early morning. Froglets that leap from feet fallen on solid lawn. It's not Silicon Valley, but Silicon Forest, so seven and void. Inside this holding of white reserve and tact, please only say one thing. It is pastoral through its gnosis. No, it's a 90s network imaginary. No, it's a test site for arranged marriage, cast as progeny. Ibid assimilationist light-skinned success story. Neoliberal, imperial, generational deep well. Number 3. Now we have no birth order or gender adjustment for falsified belonging. No debt arrangement, we ruined it gladly. Now I move consciously to a chaos magic of yearning. It's a hot to touch, jaggery scented transmission. Here are my friends that I've made, and some space to sit in the garden. Okay, this next one is about, well, I'll read it and then I'll tell you what it's about. It's called If I Wake Up and Say My Body is Real. If I wake up and say my body is real, then my body is real. Dear enemy, come down from this hell. Shitting for 2 hours straight is like sitting through an orchestra. There's almost something beautiful about it. We rise empowered at sunset, crowing at all the good words, swathed in the miasma of wellness, the bacterial mother, the genesis. One genderless fag asked me if me and my siblings will dance all night, like a body doesn't exist. If we can go forever on bomb, giving slow-lidded bovine winks and a rub where it hurts. Our packets of tightness pungent as we molish each other's thighs, singing songs to each excised vital organ, clawing acrylic vials and dripping pipettes of the tincture industrial complex down my throats. Listen to the marble lobby of our soft belly capitals. A body can't catch a break. A body works hard until it doesn't. To say it epigenetically, we found each other as eggs in our immigrant mother's stomachs, smoothly traumatized, one crush of rose petals into the herbal mix, rolling mentholated temples and gently holding foreheads, retinas, fingertips. Okay, help me alight upon a radiant afterglow. Help it last. Make it last long enough, please. This party is ending and asks, what if not for all the ways you told yourself it was possible? And it is well, and it continues to be. And that's about being chronically ill more than a rave. Okay, what else? Thanks for being such a sweet audience. I'm like all over the place today, so it feels very chill. Okay. This one is called Gender is exploitative, just let me exploit it. Oh my fucking god, thunderstorm again. Today's thunderstorm cleansed the world, will not clean my joints too. A soft whine of machinery is somewhere far away. A slow whine of hips is working close to move about this body. In the morning when the sand is washed and spread, I'm threaded with rivulets of trace elements, immortal birds on my sneaker laces. It's been a long time since we spoke of women, grown afraid to utter an application of everything and nothing, a word too Western to mean what it needs to be. Oh, changeling, I have no more craving for precision. My desire is blurred, scattered. Just the final moments after prayer wending into the dusk. Just a shadow of new growth that hovers on you still. Just changes, incredibly slow, yet tissued of careful deliverance. We have watched love come and go and are only halfway through living like this. These words are an effort to seduce time, to lengthen it. To be released from woman in the sense that I remind men I am murderable, and released from man as an urgency and near constant. Either way, every way I want is an event, an actionary. A global flash of lightning, some gestures in the darkness. A close enveloping mist on these blue mountains. This is called Trans-Desert on Fleeing the Wildfires. I have a lot of wildfire poems, for better or for worse, you know? It's just like, sometimes you feel really claustrophobic. I'm just gonna write a poem, I guess. I don't know. Okay. In temporary escape, we stop in a town where the air is so dry, my feet develop a delta system of wrinkle. The sun is older here. Was it ever dangerous? The sun an orb larger than my mind and as near as it. Here I address you, a stranger, who homes my relative measure of safety. We check on liveness between us. It's merely touch. Looking at your forehead, I think nothing other than want to and softly and heat, 99 degrees even after sunset. Eyes clothed in remnants of smoke, virus, tear gas, and dust. On long drives, we gain succor from cacti decide they are genderless icons, a fool clergy in eternal pose dance. I ask, let me be that happy. Don't worry, in a year this vortex will too have passed. We hold our arms aloft. Here's one feeling 10,000 times in the spiral petroglyphs outside of town. A granite vein shimmies through a boulder. It is hard matter, made up of its own separation. Locked in and without time, a moment by moment, desired origin. Okay. I'm going 2 more. Or maybe 3 short ones, and we'll be done. Think of those questions. No, I'm joking, you don't have to ask me. I'll probably be, no, that's fine. Okay, this is called No Religion But Dutiful Freedom. Spirit says, I am uncanny, feeling a halting rhythm like this in the club, touching my breath. I turn to it in the mirror and make eyes at the space between being alive and being thrown loose, taking soft, hungry gulps of good grip on my own sense. Your is next to me, haloed. Hold my earlobe while we're dancing. Tell me. Relief is a piss puddle of gratitude toward a sudden everything. Within it, I am horny only for peace. This is another wildfire poem. It's called Time Repair. The lower third of the ticker tape reads, feel this, an emotional evil of our corporate government when they the emotional evil of our corporate government when they deemed us responsible for climate apocalypse. Cleanliness is us and dirtiness is some other place. By now, everyone is being asked to quantify their own loss, take stock as the world ends in eventful buzzing increments. I have tentative belief that our mothers can't be hurt more now that their aging process has begun to accelerate. There is still the fear of affecting cell splitting, a thin webbed crawl over a beloved's lung, the unknowability of linings and alternate visceral landscapes. Here's a race. 2 timers, no hands. All hands counting babies that won't be had that we never wanted anyway. No fear in a room full of weapons. And heirlooms forever, instead of small dark girls falling, baby soft, swirls of ash on the carpet, reflecting the deep red California sunset. Okay, that's my last one. This is a really old one. Thanks for listening and for coming. And I brought a bottle of wine if anybody wants to drink it with me during On's talk. I'm sure that people. This is called background music. Oh, does anyone have their phone and wants to play a really peaceful song at really low volume that they like? Any volunteers? Kate, yeah, go for it. Okay, cool.
Do you have like a request of the song?
No, yeah, it's up to you.
Oh my God.
No pressure, just, you know. We won't be like, this is Kate's favorite song.
Oh my God.
Cool. Background music. I'm downtown walking on Marion and Fifth, and a woman is waving across the broad intersection. I raise a hand and I wave as the sun disappears behind the clouds again. It turns out she's stretching, and actually, I'm stretching also. There's no gesture to show how you're unsure how something started. Moving on, I'm honest. Most mornings, I'm already thinking of you. When my mind ends the dream, it looks elsewhere for an anchor. I cross the walk and crane my neck into the sun. Old thoughts slide against old thoughts, making ash for nothing new to rise from. Again, I've brought you into a day that otherwise, with its loud, quiet, and watery wind, is unaware of the way love develops. This light is undependable. Wherever sounds are housed in my body, they will go.
Can we ask questions at the end?
Only you, Mark. Only you. No.
Sure.
Yeah, I wanted to start by thanking Real Time in Space and especially Kiko for all of your support. And to Leena for starting me off so well. And we were just talking earlier about how sweet it is to have, at least for me, I'm friends with Leena and also Angel who's coming in after me, and how sweet that is to have like the homies who are also amazing artists and have it one space. So I'm really grateful for this and excited to be here and share my practice with you all. I'm a queer Cantonese person of the diaspora. My grandparents are both from Sengwai in Guangdong, southern China, which was one of the few major villages, along with Toisan, of the first phase of Cantonese immigrants, including the laborers who worked on the Transcontinental Railroad. Although my family did not come to the U.S. until my mother in the 1980s, my family was very much a part of the movement of Cantonese people to the U.S. My grandfather worked in the business of providing documentation for early Cantonese immigrants, primarily laborers known as paper sons, in order to come to the U.S. until his business crashed due to law and policy change, and he ran with my grandmother to the British colony of Hong Kong, where he thought his family would have a better life. As a child of the Cantonese diaspora, I'm constantly yearning to uncover not only my own family's roots, but also the history of the people who lived in the same areas as my grandparents, the wider community of my family's ancestry. My current body of work is informed by my experience navigating violent anti-Chinese sentiment during COVID, archival research connecting the Cantonese diaspora and silkworms in the Bay Area, and deepening relations to my familial roots, ancestors, and community by raising and exploring the physicality of silkworms. Through the teaching of the silkworm, I aim to create a contemporary Chinese folklore of a future where we can emerge from this moment of racial violence amidst a global pandemic with power and grace. Archival research, both in institutional archives and community archives, is a catalyst for this folktale. It is a wishful project in which I process the hysterics of Cantonese American history through porcelain, an ancestral material and technique that precedes our lifetimes and will exist long after. This is an in-progress piece that I wanted to share at the beginning. It's the first of a series that I'm going to be working on during my residency here, creating creatures of this folklore that I'll be talking more about based on ancient Chinese mythology. This Sino-Futurist folktale is built in part from specific moments in Cantonese American history. The spark for this folktale began when I researched the Piedmont Silk experiment in Oakland, California, during my first semester in my MFA program. As documented by the local late 19th century press, Americans were urged to awake to action by investing time in silkworm farming, otherwise American domesticity would be, quote, hopeless against Chinese people. Drawing on the Chinese folktale butterfly lovers, I conceived the silkworm as a conduit of the diaspora, and the cocoon as a portal of death, resurrection, transformation, and futurity. This conception came to light in 2020, my first semester in my MFA program, which was online at that time. I began hand-building porcelain masks in 2019 in light of the protests in Hong Kong, while my mom, my sister, and I were in Hong Kong in early 2020. Wearing masks went from being a reason to be arrested, because it was a sign of alignment with the protests, to being mandated due to COVID. Back in LA, at home, wearing a mask meant that I was experiencing violent racism. I left my job in 2020 due to the racism I experienced. Mask making became a study in the racializing objectification of this object. While in that first semester of my MFA program, I followed the lead of silkworms I was raising at home and wove 650 of the porcelain masks into a cocoon. There's Aaron Toole. Yeah, it was, no one was allowed on campus unless you had a written note, a written and signed like document that you were supposed to carry around at all times, so no one could help me with this project except for Aaron. Which was kind of scary because I was on scaffolding. So he told me to have my phone near me in case I fell off the scaffolding and needed to call for help. This cocoon became the site of a performance video, which was my first attempt at collaborating with silkworms as artists, and I'm going to show a brief clip. There is some sound, which I have to plug. Hold on a second. In 2021, I began researching the silk sisterhoods of the Pearl River Delta, which existed at the beginning of the 20th century until the silk boom ended. This is a topic with little archival trace due to the historical erasure of its history, and despite the major role these women played in global silk trade. Most of the photos in this collage are from one book written in Chinese and 2 articles. Silk sisters often started working in silk factories at a young age, sent by their families to help provide extra income. They became silk sisters if they decided to participate in the ritual hair combing ceremony, and in doing so vowed to never be married to a man, and instead be married to silk. This was seen as a form of marriage resistance, and can also be interpreted through a queer lens. In some cases, 2 sisters would vow to be together for life, and in other cases, pairs might adopt another silk sister as a daughter, and if the daughter had a partner, she would also be adopted as a daughter-in-law. Most articles on this topic contain only vaguely related photos, a photo of 2 Chinese women from the same era, for example, because of the difficulty of finding actual photographic evidence of these women. How does one imagine what might have happened through a visual medium? I began weaving porcelain at the same time as I began learning to boil, stretch, and spin the silk cocoons, while reading Gail Tsukiyami's Woman of the Silk, a fiction book about the lives of silk sisters. I first wove a sieve of porcelain based off of archival images of bamboo sleeves, like this one, used to raise silkworms. To me, Woman of the Silk read like Saidiya Hartman's critical fabulation, telling impossible stories though not situated in the academic realm of history. As a historical researcher, I endeavored to follow along the lineages of historians such as Horton Spillers and Saidiya Hartman. My historiography and archival practices are influenced by the methodology of these Black feminist historians whom I studied at my prior PhD program before I dropped out. Specifically, critical fabulation as an attempt to bring to surface the histories and voices of the author's peoples who have been objectified at the margins of hegemonic U.S. histories, the labor of painting as full a picture of their lives of the abducted, while straining against the limits of the archive to write a cultural history. Hartman often uses techniques such as questioning the events and transparency of the sources as fictions of history, while highlighting the resistance of the quote object. The goal here is to topple the hierarchy of discourse and imagine what might have or could have been in order to create a narrative of the historical object, located at, quote, the intersection of the fictive and the historical, end quote. Hartman advances the speculative, which for her is based on archival research, to fashion a narrative with the intent of telling a story that centralizes the object, which is otherwise an impossibility. In this piece, Miasma, I pushed myself to weave porcelain in forms that seem to freeze weaving in time, repel against gravity, wondering what silk sisters may have created for themselves, what wondrous larger-than-life and timeless objects might have been conceived in the queer family structure that took shape in my imagination of marriage to silk. The glaze work on this piece has been contaminated by added chemical matter to create the strange bubbling and beating. In glaze chemistry, these effects are seen as detrimental to what is beautiful. These are the effects glaze chemists warn of and write articles on. It is, in essence, a visual representation of the glaze itself being sick. Mel Y. Chen's Animacies has been highly influential in my conceptual understanding of what is contamination. A racialization of the pattern of yellow peril, of yellow terror as a looming materialization, as a threat, often with regards to overall health and physical safety. For example, Chen discusses lead poisoning, the Chinese toy terror, specifically Thomas the Tank Engine. The story of lead, as told by Chen, is, quote, a story of toxicity, security, and nationality, and is also necessarily about labor. When labor is registered, when it is hidden, and who pays attention to what kind, and who pays what kind of attention to whose labor, end quote. Symbolically and materially, Chen links the train to the history of Chinese labor that has built both the West and the US as a larger imperial whole, from the railway system to the deployment and commerce of mass production for the very items such as Thomas the Tank Engine itself. Rereading Animacies, I thought about the long history of Yellow Peril narrative that relates to Chinese immigrants and contamination. When I came back from Hong Kong in early 2020, my coworkers talked behind my back. They didn't want to be in the same room with me for fear of catching something, and if I coughed or sneezed, everyone would stare. They asked me to get tested, though at that time there was no test for COVID, and several of them asked that I be banned from working entirely. One manager asked that I get a blood test for COVID, as if COVID was already inhabiting deep within me, though I had no symptoms. While Chen discusses lead poisoning through material bodies such as the toy train, during COVID the contaminants were often Chinese people, including myself. Miasma, the title for this piece, is a now obsolete medical theory that a poisonous vapor or mist filled with particles from decomposed matter, miasmata, that cause illnesses. The miasmatic position was that diseases were the product of environmental factors such as contaminated water, foul air, and poor hygienic conditions. Such infection was not passed between individuals but would affect individuals within the locale that gave rise to such vapors. Miasma also has documentation evident in China, specifically prevalent from Chinese scholars and officials, that inherent geological environments were at fault for miasma-infected southern China. In San Francisco, Chinatown, miasma was a reason given for creating a locked border around Chinatown while residents died of bubonic plague without access to resources. From 1899 to 1901, bubonic plague caused an epidemic in San Francisco, though health officials often falsely traced all epidemic outbreaks to Chinatown. Chinese people were already seen as, quote, a social, moral, and political curse to the community, a quote from the San Francisco Board of Supervisors municipal reports during that time. California's Governor Gage denied the plague for over 2 years and signed several gag orders. Meanwhile, police officers created a patrolled border between Chinatown and the rest of the city, keeping its 25,000 to 30,000 mainly Chinese residents locked inside. The State Board of Health printed a report in 1901 denying the existence of the disease. During the lockdown, all Asian immigrants were restricted from travel, cutting off 20,000 residents from employment, food, and resulting in many deaths. Miasma was eventually replaced with what we now know as germ-3. Though my work focuses on the Cantonese diaspora from southern China to the west, this could not be separated from labor. And so in my pieces, I try to interweave this history of invisibilized Chinese labor through material connections such as the surgical mask, porcelain, and silk. These materials themselves are relics of global trade and migration. Through intentional use of few materials, I work to deepen the story I am telling visually. Silkworms are one such way I intend to bring attention to laboring subjects. Silk and silkworms have become more than research or inspirational project ideas. They have become the methodology through which I work, whether that be pulling the threads of Cantonese history that have been erased or hidden in the margins, or weaving that history along with the threads of what has been seen as feminine or domestic or queer histories, or working through ceramics from the perspective of the silkworm. Though my work focuses on the Cantonese diaspora from southern China to the west coast, interwoven with the diaspora are themes of contamination, labor, family, and queer Chinese futurism. I think of the ways in which Chinese people have a long history with porcelain, just as they do a long history with silk, and how these histories interact with labor and objection. I wonder, what is it to be the laboring body, the porcelain body, or to be the silk? What does it mean to embody these materials directly rather than work with them? What does the silkworm think of its species' forced domesticity as a result of its use in global trade? Or, what does the porcelain body have to say about its shape? What does it mean to be a lantern, thin and full of light? As I work to tell the stories of the invisibilized laborers like the silkworms and the silk sisters, I wonder how I might ask questions of the in-between, the trans species. Will my working with silkworms create a space for such questions, or be forced under the lens of Chinese exoticism as my body has been throughout my life? How do I, as an artist, work with my racial framing without limiting my thinking to these same racial frameworks? How do I escape the realm of, as Mel Chen calls it, a tired and fatal venue for human self-making, and instead use my work with silkworms to invite a queer trans animality, a more porous futurity? Throughout these past 2 years, I have raised silkworms from egg to cocoon, boiled and spun the cocoons into threads, and learned how to weave the threads. I understand silkworms as great teachers of labor, global capitalism, queer animacies, and much more. Here are some facts on silkworms I will leave you with. Silkworms have been domesticated into laboring bodies. They can now only survive in captivity. Silk moths do not have mouths, they only exist to breed. Bernard Heinrich, a modern biologist, theorizes that the genetic makeup of the larva and the moth are so separate that the cocoon is a place of death, rebirth, and reincarnation. This last fact reminds me of many traditional Chinese folk tales of the butterflies opera and many others. In my work, past and present Cantonese folktales and modern biology, silkworms and humans overlap, combine, and reincarnate to create a contemporary Chinese folklore of the future. This folktale is not fleshed out, it is in progress, but here are things I know. The silkworm has not been bred into a domesticated laboring body. The silkworm is free from capitalism. The silkworm's protectors are the silk sisters, married to the silk and the sisterhood, the community. The silkworms and the sisters create in harmony. My role here is the archaeologist, the historiographer, tasked with recreating and retelling the folktale to pass on this and other diasporic tales of freedom via porcelain relics. As a closing, I would like to share with you part of the documentation for Cocoon, which was a 45-minute ceremony performed by Jazz Lin and Kyoko Takanaka underneath my sculpture of the same title for my reception of the Murphy Award at SOMARTS in fall 2021. Exploring grief through the container of a cocoon, the performers embody ancestry and progeny, railroad worker, and chop suey circuit nightclub dancer, silkworm and moth, light and shadow, as they move through non-linear cycles of metamorphosis between the simultaneous truths of trauma, pain, freedom, and joy in their lineage. The documentation was recorded by Aiden Young and edited collaboratively by myself, Aiden, Jazz, and Kyoko. The background music was recorded in Berlin, Germany in August 2021 by Kyoko, along with a group of collaborators. Now's a good time to stop. Thank you.